This is Seemorerocks, recording from Down Under. I've got three very special guests with me today. Firstly, sitting on my right, I've got two friends that I've known for a long time. I've got Dido and Pam, and they're both lifelong Buddhist practitioners. And Dido is a teacher of meditation and a writer. And Pam has a background working for the Department of Conservation, and her passion is environmental education. Sitting to my left is Jennifer Hynes, who will need very little introduction to this audience. But I just have to say that for me, at least, she's one of the best communicators of this information that I've heard. So anyway, what we thought, because everyone listening to this will be familiar with the science by now, is Jennifer gave a talk last night in Petone, and the title of which was Embracing Climate Change with a Humanitarian Spirit. So I thought, seeing that each of the four of us, has in common that we have some sort of a spiritual practice. In most cases it's Buddhist. How we respond to the information that we know, how we respond, how we embrace climate change with a humanitarian spirit. So perhaps I can start with you, Jennifer. This information is terribly, terribly hard to deal with, and it can take a tremendous, toll on us if we don't do something to, some work on ourselves to be able to embrace this. So I'm just wondering if you could say something.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this. This is a wonderful opportunity to discuss this very, very important topic. And, this topic is so dire that it can drive us into panic, and it can drive us into despair, and we're ineffective with ourselves or with others when we're driven into despair. And we become aware, we understand the science, and we become aware that the situation around us, we're just witness to the unfolding demise of our planet. And how do we deal with this? This is a tremendous amount of psychological load to put on anybody. And, when you're in an airplane, the stewardesses always tell you, in case of emergency, the oxygen masks will come down. Put it first upon yourself and then take care of those around you. And I think that's that's a very, very important point. We need to actually integrate practices into our own lives that will keep us strong and resilient and able to continue in a hopeful fashion. And when we say hope, we're not really talking hopium. We're talking hope inside our own spirits and inside our own lives. So I have found that for myself, there are certain practices that I've integrated into my own life that assist me in continuing to go on with this information and be able to take it on board in a constructive way, and also to raise the awareness of others in the process. One thing that I've integrated into my own life is the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. I've practiced Buddhism for a number of years, and I have found that through the practice of chanting in Tibetan and singing in Tibetan, it sort of tunes me up like a tuning fork, and it enables me to continue, because you kind of process. Sometimes when I've had a really, really rough day and I go into a chanting session, we do it on Wednesdays with my Lama, and we do it in a group. It's very powerful to do things together in a group, because there's an energy that builds up. Sometimes I just chant my heart out, and I chant very, very loud. So I've become, a good leader, actually, in the chanting practice, in the Chenrezig practice. But at the end of it, I just feel cleansed, and I feel strong, and I feel tuned up. And so that's one thing that I've integrated into my own life that's extremely helpful. Another practice that I've integrated into my own life is the practice of Bikram yoga. And these are sessions that are held in a hot room. It's Fahrenheit, about 107 degrees for 90 minutes, and it's a very strenuous practice. And I usually do this about 2 to 3 times a week. And you sweat a tremendous amount. Once you get up and and this is also a group practice. So usually there are like between 20 and 30 other practitioners in the room. And we practice together for about 90 minutes. And, when you get up from this practice, your towel, contains like about 1 liter of sweat. So you get rid of all of the toxins in your body. And in the process, you become very limber and very strong, and it tunes up your spirit as well. So I know that these are rather intensive practices, but I have found that intensive information needs intensive practices. And these are just 2 things that I have found that work tremendously well for me.
Dido, would you? What?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've been immersed in the Tibetan tradition for, 40 years or more than 40 years. And I teach it. And I think actually one way that I sustain myself is by teaching, because I'm in a group of people. I can talk about my own practice, but in a group of people working together with their inner life. I've done the opposite from you, Jennifer, and I never chant in Tibetan unless I'm in a group with my teacher or whatever. On my own and with my students, I've taken on the creative work of finding forms that Westerners can make use of these teachings. So we're in a constant state of experiment and deep sharing in the group. How does this work for you? And I find the satisfaction of working in groups, doing that work, and the groups, we apply the teachings to our lives. So I've been living in eco-villages and working with transition towns and contexts where the meditators that I work with are thinking about these climate themes. And so we're actually applying the Tibetan practices to the, how we cope with these feelings. And I find it so creative and inspiring for my own growth continues to happen, and to be sharing in the growth of others as well, and finding ways that we can make the best we can of this and become the best that we are. And I think part of that for me is that Buddhism actually, for me, gives a clear view of why we're killing ourselves off. In Buddhism, they say that suffering comes from greed, hatred, ignorance, attachment, and self-seeking. And that's exactly what's killing us off. And so Buddhism gives me a very clear view of, and then of course Buddhism has all these teachings about how to get out of that. And so even though I know we're extremely unlikely to get out of it, I think whether we actually get out of, whether we actually all survive or not, we can still, by having a vision of how to live well, that seems to me to be, well, it's what keeps me going, and I try to do it. Yeah, and my own practice, I have so many practices I've done over the years, and one of them is the 21 taras in Buddhism, there are several practices of 21 taras, and the one that I've been given by my teacher, actually, you meditate on protecting from the fear of hurricanes, poverty, untimely death, war, poisons, all the actual issues that, this is a 1,000-year-old practice, but it's all the themes that we need to work on. And Tara is the most beautiful, compassionate goddess of how to act in the world compassionately. So I take her as my companion and model, and I try to be like Tara. But there's another goddess that I meditate on a lot, who's a dancer, a wild dancer, and I'm a wild dancer. Vajrayogini is her name. And she teaches me how to dance among the disaster and dance in emptiness. Because the mystery of emptiness, the mystery which in Buddhism it's often referred to as the Great Mother, and I take that up, the Great Mother, because it's got a kind of warmth to it, and also because Western, Mother Nature, you can sort of identify that with Mother Nature. So to dance in the mystic light of the Great Mother, in among the wreckage, I think what these goddesses teach me is not to ignore my feelings, not to try and put my feelings aside or let them go. But what my teacher Adzom says is yogis and yoginis who do this practice transform negative emotions to positive. So I take all the horrors, the fear, the wreckage, and the anger and the despair and all the rest, and by dancing or meditating in other ways, I transform it I find the love in it and the creativity, and then that love leads me to act in whatever way I can to try to help with whatever I can. And one way, of course, is writing books in which sharing the meditations and things like that. So I'm just absorbed in it a lot, but I do outer action as well, like creating eco-villages and things like that. So I combine it all.
Great. Wow, that's a hard act to follow. But Pam, do you have anything to add for yourself? How do you deal with this?
I'll just start by saying that currently my work in the outer world is with children, and it's a beautiful, beautiful project about helping young people to connect to nature in their own backyards and neighbourhoods through igniting their imaginations and then giving creative voice to what would their future look like, what would their city look like if it was rich in nature and a wonderful place to live. What I know from the research is that young people are bombarded with dystopic visions of the future. We're working with young children from 7 to 14, and they're pretty open, especially the young ones, and it's been profound and wonderful to actually realise how children's visions of the future can be supported and enabled by just allowing them the joy of exploring nature and discovering their own reservoirs of creativity. We all start out with a beautiful, clear, open mind and heart, and working in this way with children has given me another whole perspective on, yes, we are all born with radiance. And so in order to do that for me, and having had more than 30 years of working as an environmental educator and a yoga teacher, my own practice enables me to bring, I think, a joy and enthusiasm for the work that I do, and also to deeply respect others, regardless of where they are coming from. Woven into all of that for me is a deep love of nature, and nature, I think, is part of my refuge, is where I find solace and renewal, along with meditation practice and quite rigorous yoga practice, which I also teach. I've worked with Dido for some years, exploring the Tara practices, and I would like to do more of that, because my exposure, I guess, to Buddhism and Iyengar yoga has been in some ways through very traditional Eastern forms of transmitting those practices, often through men, and actually for me learning that the feminine and all that that brings, it is embodied within the sort of richness of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and seeing that brought to light and being able to actually experience within myself the feminine and what it is as a woman to be working in the world today with all its sort of challenges and difficulties it's a sort of a journey that I'm on now, and my practice is changing as a result of that. Last night in Jennifer's talk, I was very heartened to have a woman presenting and bringing that dimension of how do we deal with this with a compassionate way, and looking after ourselves and after others. And to me it's that almost the mother that's needed now, so that, for example, in working with children, yes, they know things are changing, they can understand that, but the sort of embracing of them into a value and a context that's sort of loving and strengthening for them and enables them to move forward with confidence is really important. I'll stop because I'm still recovering from a long plane flight yesterday, but it's a work in progress.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add? Or?
Well, I'd kind of like to, I thank you so much for both of your comments. They're just stunning, and I'd like to especially respond to what Dido has said initially. The reason we got into this mess is because our darker nature has really been in charge and running it. Some people call it the patriarchy. You can call it whatever you want, but it's really kind of like our darker nature has been in charge, our selfishness has been in charge, and we've gotten away from our traditional values that the indigenous people know about. I was so touched last night when Tarana came up, and she's a Maori woman who came last night to the lecture, and she said, this is what is needed. Yes, we need to know about the science, but we need to know about compassion. We need to know about love and equanimity and sharing. In Buddhism, you have to overcome your darker nature, and you focus on giving and the opposite of selfishness. You focus on compassion and the commonality that we share with other people. We're all living beings. We're all loving beings. We're social beings. We need stronger social networks, and we need stronger friends. When I first came into this awareness of near-term human extinction, I was alone, and it was a very, very difficult thing to come to awaken to in a solitary state. And the only thing I really wanted to do was to connect with somebody who had also woken up so I could share my thoughts. Because I had been warned off of this subject by many people, and they had told me, please just stop thinking about that. You're going to drive yourself crazy or something. But the thing is, we have to contend with this. We're at a pivotal moment on our life on Earth. We're in the 6th great extinction of Earth, and we have the privilege to become aware of this. This is a heavy burden to carry, and in order to carry this burden, we must expand and we must evolve. There's no way we can carry this knowledge and still be limited human beings. So we have to just transform all the darker natures and selfishness and division and all of these things that have got us into this, that are expressed at the corporate level on steroids. This really
Absolutely.
has to change. We have to become compassionate beings, and the human form must evolve in order to bear this and to get through this.
And I think, when I imagine it, when I imagine what the world would be like if everybody suddenly did that, how would we bear how would we bear to kill the forests and the animals, and how would we bear to cause poverty and suffering to each other? How would we bear it if we really could see how precious life is, you know? I think the core of my practice is probably the preciousness of life, my awareness. You know, I suffer a lot of illness from pesticide poisoning, and so I have a lot of difficulty to deal with, but I'm still alive. I still have this precious awareness, and everyone, you know, we all have this. And, you know, what a treasure, what an utter treasure. How can people put that in danger? You know, if we could only remember, the important thing is that we are alive, not that we have billions and dollars and lots of, you know, it's just so, I do, the frustration of not knowing why people don't see how precious life is. But I think one thing about the spiritual practice, the Buddhist practice really teaches you to be in the present moment, with whatever is, with the reality. You know, that self-centeredness and greed blinds us, you know. Instead of seeing what is now, we say, well, I want more or something, you know, I'm not satisfied. Mm-hmm. But if you just look at what is, if you trained, I find when I'm trained to look at what is and just be with it, then it's kind of so profound, even if it's really painful. It's kind of got the profundity of somehow part of being alive is to recognize what we are, you know, and the bad, you know, the miserable, painful sides of it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel that there's a vast confusion inherent in the human condition, and from that confusion sprouts a lot of fear, and from that fear sprouts a lot of selfishness. Really, there are only two emotions in life. There's fear and there's love. And there's really just a war between the fear and the love. Now, we have succumbed as a world on a mass consciousness level to the fear, and it's been expressed in the corporate infrastructure. It's been expressed in our wars.
Absolutely.
But this is because we're confused about the nature of our existence.
Yeah.
We feel very strongly that we're physical limited beings. And because we're physical limited beings, and we all have a terminal disease, it's called life.
Yes.
By definition, when you're alive, you will die.
Yeah.
All of us in this room are just passing through, and the miracle of it is we've got 4 souls here that are all joined up, and we're talking about this. So we're creating a bubble of awareness around this and adding love to this. But I believe there's a massive confusion about the human condition because we believe that we are limited physical beings. It's my belief that we actually are not limited physical beings. I believe we're multi-dimensional beings and eternal beings as well. So whether or not this is true, this is my belief, it gives me great peace, because knowing that we're greater than our physical appearance just gives me a more expansive feeling that, you know, and you're not as fearful that way. You know, once you've been driven into fear, you automatically go into selfishness and greed and I want more and all of this. But once we feel strongly that we're actually based in love and that the core of our soul is love, we can react in a more sane fashion, and we can share that love with others because it's not a limited experience. So we have to kind of evolve from a limited 3D experience into a limitless multi-dimensional experience, and that's the process of evolution in our lives. And if we be here now and experience the core of love that is inherent in our beings and inherent in our consciousness, we're going to have a lot better time of it in any case.
We are.
Yeah.
And I think one thing...
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I think we've got to start winding this up, so if we could just make some sort of concluding comments. So.
Okay, I'll say briefly, a lot of people are scared by the word love. I used to be like, oh no, I can't love, you know. And I think I've made it one of my big practices in life to learn what is love.
Yes.
you know. Love is many things, like in Buddhism they have these 4 loves: friendliness, compassion for pain, and joy, love in someone's joy, you know, and equanimity. And just practicing even with the basis of 4 loves, the infinite variety of emotions that love is, I think that that's helped me to understand, to not be afraid of that big word, you know. Sometimes love is very subtle and gentle and just being present, you know, and sometimes it's a big wow, but not always. It doesn't have to be, you know. I think that's really important to remember when talking about love.
Okay,
Thanks.
Pam.
Yeah, Pam.
I have the image of some children we've been working with from one of the social housing big apartment blocks in the inner city here in Wellington through the Imagine My City project, and I just have this vision of the joy of a young Māori boy who lives in one of these apartments running through the bush with just pure joy to be out in that natural realm. And joy is just an emotion that I see children so easily tapping into and expressing, and working with them to build that into their lives seems to be my work at the moment, and I'm privileged to be part of it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we'd better finish off now. So thank you very much for your perspectives, each of you. And I hope this will stimulate a lot of discussion amongst you, and that you'll come together and, well, to take this discussion further. Thank you very much.